There are not many certainties that can be relied upon in the modern world, but it would seem that no matter the circumstance, time will continue on, whether we are here to witness it or not. Spring will give way to summer, summer to autumn, and eventually winter will draw the life from this earth, before it too fades, and the cycle continues. But this has not always been the case. In the ancient legends of Scotland, it is told that at the beginning of the world, winter was the only season, and for many thousands of years, the land lay locked in a permanent veil of ice and snow. This wasteland was ruled by the dreaded Cailleach, Beira, Queen of Winter. This icy tundra was all that had ever been, and many thought that this harsh, eternal winter would never end. This is the story of how the first summer came to Scotland, of how Angus met Bride, and of the thawing of the Queen of Ice. The great Cailleach Beira, first of all the gods, was a wicked and cruel ruler. All in the land feared the Queen of Winter, and none dared challenge her power. So merciless was the Cailleach that on the very day she met the beautiful young goddess named Bride, the Winter Queen took her captive and hid her beauty from the world. Beira determined that the girl's presence within her frozen kingdom was unacceptable, so Bride was held prisoner in the heart of a great mountain constructed by Beira. The Cailleach was said to be jealous of Bride's youth and beauty. While imprisoned, the young goddess was forced to wear threadbare rags and was put to work with the other servants within the great mountain. The Cailleach would often reserve the cruelest and most degrading of tasks for the beautiful young woman. Even once these foul tasks were complete, the Winter Queen would berate her servant and find fault in all her work. On one day, Beira gave the goddess a thick brown fleece and told her to wash it in a running stream until the fleece became pure white. Bride, obeying the command, went to a small pool beneath a waterfall just outside the entrance to the mountain. There she laboured all day long and washed the fleece until her hands were calloused and raw, but still she could not remove the colour from the fleece. That evening, as Bride returned, Beira flew into a wild rage and viciously scolded the girl. "You fool!" she called. "The fleece is as dark now as it was this morning." Bride protested that she had spent the whole day scrubbing the fleece below the waterfall of the Red Rock, but the colour was not to be shifted. "Then tomorrow you'll wash it again," called Beira angrily, "and if it is not white, you will go on washing it the next day and every day after. Now leave my sight." It was a sorrowful time indeed for the imprisoned goddess. Day after day she would wash the fleece, but to no avail. Even if she was to wash it every day until the end of time, she could not turn brown wool white. Then it happened that on one morning, while Bride was out washing the fleece, an old grey-bearded man appeared at the pool. The man pitied the goddess as he watched her tears fall into the water. "Who are you?" said the man, "and why are you in such sorrow?" Bride looked up to the man and told him that she was a prisoner of Beira and of how she had been given this impossible task. "I'm truly sorry for your misfortune," said the man as he began to look at the fleece. "What is your name?" Bride asked the stranger. "I am the father of Winter, Bodach, the husband of Beira, and I shall make the brown fleece white." The old man took the brown fleece in his arms and shook the water from it, once, then twice. Then, on the third shake, the fleece turned a magnificent snow white. Bride was overcome with joy for the first time in a great while. She quickly thanked Bodach for his help, and was extremely grateful her labour was over. The Father of Winter handed the now pale fleece back to Bride, and offered her another gift, a bunch of white snowdrops. "If Beira scolds you," said the man, "give her these flowers. Tell her they came from the green fir wood, and tell her also that the cress is springing up along the banks of the streams, and that new grass has begun to grow in the fields." Smiling warmly, Bodach bade the young woman farewell, and left the poolside. That evening, Bride returned to the mountain, and laid the white fleece at the feet of Beira. But the cruel Winter Queen seemed entirely oblivious to the fleece. Instead, her one good eye was fixed on the snowdrops in the woman's hand. "Where did these flowers come from?" Beira questioned, with a seething anger. Bride anxiously forced out the answer. "The snowdrops are now growing in the green fir wood. The cress is springing up on the banks of streams, and the new grass is beginning to grow in the fields." "Evil are these tidings you bring," sneered the Cailleach. "Now begone from my sight." Bride turned and slowly walked away. But no longer was her heart filled with sorrow. A new joy had begun to grow within her, and she knew the frozen powers of the Winter Queen were no longer unstoppable. One day, Beira's reign would come to an end. The existence of the snowdrops told the Winter Queen that her grasp upon the land had lessened. This was unacceptable. The very next morning, Beira summoned the 8 lesser Cailleach. She ordered the hags to ride north, south, east, and west. Their task was to smite the world with frost and tempest, so that no flower could bloom, and no blade of grass could survive. The hags mounted their giant goats, and rode forth to do the bidding of the Winter Queen. The great Cailleach herself called first for her magic warhammer, which she would use to manipulate the land to fit her desire. Then she would call upon her giant wolf, and upon its back the Winter Queen rode to war. Meanwhile, far to the west, the youngest son of Beira lay sleeping in the land of eternal youth. His name at this point in our story was Angus the Ever-Young. When Angus was born, he developed with much the same speed as all of the other lesser gods or sons of Beira. But when the boy reached adulthood, it was said that both time and age no longer had any effect on Angus. And as his siblings grew older, Angus remained ever young. The son of Beira had never been a lover of the harsh cold which cloaked the land of his mother, so he decided to live on the mysterious Green Isle of the West, also known as the Land of Youth. As the young god lay in a vibrant green pasture, an odd vision appeared within his mind. There was a cold pool of water, and by its edge sat the most beautiful woman he had ever beheld. But this brought him no joy, as tears were falling from the woman's eyes. So transfixed by the woman was Angus, that he did not notice the old man by his side until he spoke. "You are far from your land of rest, young Angus." The young god was startled by the voice, but there was only one question on his mind. "For what reason does the poor maiden weep?" asked Angus. "She's the slave of Beira," said the old man. "She weeps, for she suffers great cruelty." The young woman now looked deep within the eyes of Angus and called out, "When will you set me free?" At this the man woke with a start, and found himself all alone on the warm grass of the Green Isle. Quickly he rose, and rushed to the grand castle belonging to the king of the Green Isle. Angus told the king of his strange dream, and asked for his aid in deciphering its true meaning. The king was a good friend and teacher to Angus. He was known to be a wise and caring ruler. There was no better in all the land to help Angus with this question. "The woman you saw is Bride, and in the days to come she will be your queen," stated the king. "For when Angus meets Bride, you will become the king of summer. Of this your mother knows well. It was her wish to keep Bride hidden from you, so that her own reign may be extended. In some surprise at the revelation, Angus declared that he would go forth at once and search the lands for his queen-to-be. At this the wise king shook his head and told Angus that the wolf month was upon them, and always uncertain is the temper of the wolf. "That is of no matter," called Angus, "for I shall borrow for the wolf month 3 days from later in the year." Angus then cast a powerful spell upon the land and sea. He did as he said, and took from later in the year 3 days. On those days the seas were calm, and the sun shone warm and bright over the mountains and the glens. Angus mounted his magnificent white horse and rode eastward to the land that would one day be known as Scotland. It is said that the Everyoung was clad in raiment of shining gold, and from his shoulders hung a robe of royal crimson. Mounted upon his white horse, the young god was a wondrous sight to see. From this time on, Angus the Everyoung became Angus of the White Steed. With all haste, the god rode across the waters, and by dawn of the following day he had reached the Grampian Mountains, where his search would begin. Up and down the land Angus rode, but there was no sign of his captive queen. Meanwhile, in Beira's mountain fortress, the young goddess bride dreamt of Angus and his quest. She watched him search far and wide, and knew that one day he would find her, and she would be free. Waking from the dream, the enchanting blue eyes of Bride shed tears of joy, and as those tears broke upon the ground, up sprang the first violets of spring. It did not take long for word of Angus and his search for Bride to reach the ears of the Winter Queen. This drove the Cailleach into a wild frenzy, and on the third night of Angus's search, she raised a great tempest of ice and snow. So fierce was the storm that the young god was driven back to the Green Isle, where he would take refuge and await his next opportunity. Time and time again, Angus would return to Scotland in search for the woman of his dreams. Eventually, he would discover the mountain stronghold, and on that day, the pair would finally meet. One morning, as Bride was in the green fir wood, not far from the mountain, she would come across the gold-clad man upon his white steed. All around them, violets and primroses began to bloom. The horseman dismounted and said, "Beautiful goddess, I beheld you in a dream, weeping tears of great sorrow. I have come to free you from the Cailleach." The woman embraced the young god and replied, "I too beheld you in a dream. You are riding over hills and through glens in your search for me. This is a great day." From the surrounding trees came a grand procession of the lesser gods, those that we now know as the Doinishi. They stopped before Bride and fell to their knees, as each claimed the beautiful goddess as their new queen. The lord of the Sidhe then gifted Bride a peerless robe of silver, and a star like crystal, as pure as her beauty, and as bright as the joy Angus brought her. The crystal was the gem of queens, and would forever be known as the guiding star of Bride. Now, in her magnificent silver robe, and with the star hanging above her heart, Bride looked every bit the Queen of Summer. The Lord of the Sidhe led Angus and Bride to a grand palace hidden deep within the woodland, and as the pair journeyed together, the frost on the ground beneath them thawed, and flowers of every colour sprang from the soil. The birds and animals began to cheer and call out, "Spring has come!" All rejoiced in the presence of the gods. Once they reached the woodland palace, a great magic was released. Although mankind had yet to witness the new king and queen, their presence was felt all throughout Scotland as the cold and barren land became full of warmth and growth. But it would not be long before the Cailleach would learn that Angus had found Bride, and her screams of fury could be heard echoing all throughout the mountains and glens. Yet the Winter Queen would not give up her rule without a fight. She seized her magic warhammer and began to smite the ground until it was frozen, hard as iron once more. Terrible was her wrath, as she tried with all her strength to hold back the coming of summer. Beira feared the new growth within her land, and worried that her authority would pass away if Bride and Angus were to be united. Then on one morning, Beira heard the sounds of birds as they flew on the wind. The song they sang was "Hail to the gods of summer, Angus and Bride are married." In a fit of pure rage, the Winter Queen again summoned the lesser Cailleach. This time, they rode to war against Angus and Bride. Beira, now mounted atop a swift black steed, led the 8 hags to the hidden palace. Dark black clouds followed the great Cailleach. Although she was weakened, Beira was still the first and strongest of the gods. And as she and the hags landed in fury at the palace, the Sidhe fled for their lives. Even the powers of all the lesser gods combined was no match for the Winter Queen. Angus also knew that he had not yet the power to face his mother, so he and Bride leapt upon the white steed and fled from the dark powers of Beira. For many days, Angus would ride westward over the hills and glens, constantly pursued by the Cailleach and her servants. Finally, the young god and the queen would escape to the Green Isle of the West, for only there would they be given sanctuary. For a time, the couple enjoyed their life in the Isle, but soon, the King and Queen of Summer would long to return to Scotland and take their true place as rulers. Many times, Angus would climb upon his great steed and set forth for the mainland. When he came ashore, the birds would welcome the Summer King, but news of his arrival would always reach Beira. On one occasion, when Angus reached the land of glens and bens, the Cailleach raised one of the grandest storms ever recorded. The hail and snow lasted many weeks. The bitter cold took the life of many men and cattle, not to mention destroying all the early crops. In the face of this power, Angus once again retreated, and winter continued in Scotland. The summer god would not let his past failures dampen his spirits. Each time Angus was forced to retreat, he would always return, more powerful and more determined than he had ever been before. There then came a day when Beira saw the budding trees and the sprouting flowers appear in every corner of the land. She sensed storms that would drown the plants, winds that would tear branch from root, and all the time she would be beating the ground with her magic warhammer. But this time her efforts were in vain. No matter how many plants she froze, spring had come to Scotland, and in the warmth of the sun, her body wearied. The Cailleach was not yet without hope. If only she could put a halt to Angus and his visits to the mainland, perhaps she could regain control. This time, the old goddess had not the power of her own to block the Summer King's journey, so she called upon the 8 hags for a third time. On this occasion, they were tasked with turning all the seas around Scotland into wild torrents and maelstroms. So violent were the waters of spring that Angus could not cross from the Green Isle. For many days, the young god did battle with the lesser Cailleach. Each time he was wearied, Bride would bring him food and water from the magical isle, and with his renewed strength and vigour, Angus would eventually drive back the hags and cause them to flee before the summer. The lesser Cailleach retreated to the hearts of the mountains, and there they would stay, awaiting the return of their Winter Queen. The aging and weakened Beira had one final plan to return the land to the icy grasp of winter. If you will remember back to earlier in this tale, Angus borrowed 3 winter days from later in the year, and it was now time that those days returned to their rightful place. Beira summoned to her the 3 winter days, which came in the form of powerful dark spirits riding upon 3 giant black hogs. the wicked riders brought with them a fierce hail and snow. The land was once again white, the lochs and rivers were frozen, green trees were shattered by the ice, and throughout the land thousands died. For those days, winter had returned. At that time, Angus could not come near the mainland, and Beira once again was queen. But on the morning of the fourth day, the Cailleach's power left her. She could no longer hold back the growth of spring. The weakness of her extreme age was now an unworldly burden. It was on this morning when the tired old hag of winter would see the glowing radiance of her youngest son as he rode over the mountains on a magnificent white horse. It was then that she knew her reign had come to an end. In the presence of Angus and Bride, Beira and her followers would scatter and flee. Some tell that before the Cailleach left Scotland, she would hide her magic hammer beneath a holly tree, and it is for this reason that no grass will ever grow under the holly. On the day that is of equal length with the night, Angus and Bride would finally be hailed as the true king and queen of summer. The land was theirs to rule, as were the lives upon it. The pair would ride from north to south, followed by a great procession of the Sidhe. On their travels, they brought with them a gentle wind and the healing warmth of summer. The plants and forests grew rapidly as the reign of Angus began. Seeds were sown, and the people would call upon the beautiful Summer Queen to grant them a good harvest. Before long, all of Scotland was covered in magnificent flowers of every colour. This has been the story of Angus and Bride, or the coming of summer. Yet it is far from the end of the tale, as Beira has drank from the waters of youth, and as the days go by and she grows younger, she will soon return to reclaim her throne, and once again winter will come to Scotland. This is an eternal war, a war between warmth and cold, light and dark, growth and decay, winter and the coming of summer. The tale of Angus and Bride is a wonderful one indeed. It tells of the cyclic nature of the seasons and the ancient gods of Scotland. Like many great stories from mythology, this one has many versions and varieties. In one, it was said that Angus was often accompanied by a small flock of birds, which would circle his head and sing sweet songs while he travelled. In another, Angus had the powers of resurrection. He would breathe life into plants, animals, and humans as he journeyed Scotland, bringing with him the warmth of spring. Other tales of Angus tell that he owned a golden harp with silver strings, and within it great power lay hidden. It was said that when the god played the divine instrument, he would be followed by maidens and youths as they traversed the woodlands of Scotland. Angus was also the god of love, and would bless a couple's union by kissing them both. Then when the couple was parted for any time, the kisses of the god would take the form of small birds, and whisper to the parted lovers joyful memories of their relationship. In almost all versions, Angus is portrayed as a powerful warrior or soldier, even though most of his myths concern matters of love and life. Yet it is this connection with warfare that marks Angus out as a major member of the early Scottish pantheon. While the gods had many differing roles and powers, they were all related in some form with war and battle. Even the beautiful goddess Bride had a part to play in war, and was commonly called on for aid while in a battle or dire situation. Much of this myth comes from old Celtic mythology, where Angus and his wife Brigid were major figures. In the original stories, Angus is loosely connected to life, and appears more as a god of love, poetry, and intelligence. Many of the old tales involve Angus using his intelligence to achieve his goals, by tricking other gods or outsmarting them. In fact, it was in that way he gained the freedom of his wife Brigid. She, on the other hand, was commonly seen as the goddess of wisdom, healing, smithing, and farming. In some tales, it is said that Brigid and her sisters were a form of triple deity, which was composed of three sisters with the same name, but different passions: Brigid the poet, Brigid the healer, and Brigid the smith. Although both the Scottish and the traditional Celtic stories involve what some believe to be the same or similar characters, they are actually quite different from each other, yet both open a window into the hearts and minds of our history and past. Thank you for listening, and I would like to give a special thank you to my patrons who support the channel and help me bring you these stories. I couldn't do this work without them. Angus hath come, the young, the fair, the blue-eyed god with golden hair, the god who to the world doth bring this morn the promise of spring, who moves the birds to song ere yet he hath awakened the violet, or the soft primrose on the steep, while buds are laid in lidded sleep, and white snow wraps the hills serene, ere glows the larch's vivid green. Through the brown wood and bare, all hail, Angus, and may thy will prevail. He comes, he goes, and far and wide he searches for the goddess bride. Slán